past. So Jill is the founder of Aftermath of Suicide. And after her son's death on December 27th in 2014, so we both lost our children in December. Mine was December 14th and hers was December 27th. She began that very lonely and dark journey that triggered depression, passive suicidal ideation, and PTSD. Now she's a mental health advocate. Her intention is to share her story and the lessons she's learned and what she did to stay alive, to bring awareness to the signs of depression in children and what others don't suffer, and what others who don't suffer can do to help those that do. Unrelated, untreated depression is the #1 cause of suicide. It is the only illness that we blame the person who has it. There is nothing like having someone who can relate to and knows and understands the pain. There is a difference between real, raw experience. And like the rest of us, she doesn't have that PhD, but she does have those life experiences. So if everyone will give a nice warm welcome to Jill in the chat box, say hello, we'll let her take it away.
Hi. Thank you, Peggy, for inviting me. This is such a important topic, as we all know who are connected, and I call it being in this club that none of us want to be in. And you start to notice this when you meet people that don't have any clue about suicide, right? But I want to thank those for joining, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. You know, December 27th, as Peggy mentioned, it'll be 7 years that my son took his life. No one saw it coming. He never threatened before. He never tried it. So it was a tsunami that hit us. And I was out of state with my then husband. So you can imagine getting that text message that came through from my son and not being home. I was 8-hour drive away and it was grueling. But I can only tell you that what happened to me and why my story may be a little different, maybe not than anybody, but most, it triggered such severe depression in me that I was passively suicidal, meaning I didn't want to live. I didn't want to wake up. I begged God, please, to not wake me. There's a difference between passive and active. Active is actually having a plan. You know, I'm going to kill myself tomorrow and this is how I'm going to do it. So I knew immediately that I needed help. This is way too large for any of us to do on our own. So I immediately, found a therapist. But I have to say, the right therapist is key for you to getting better, because a lot of times, right, India? A lot of times we can find a marriage counselor, and I'm not saying they're not good, but if they don't understand grief and maybe even suicide, loss, or suicide, it is the key really to getting well. So I knew that I needed somebody great. I found a phenomenal therapist. And for me, I needed meds. I'm not pushing that on anybody. It's not for everybody. But for me, it saved my life. So with that said, 6 months after my son took his life, my then husband left me by a text message that he was leaving the marriage. And that was another shock to my system as I'm trying to grieve through 6 months mark of just my son, which, you're in shock. The first year, you are in shock. And now I get this other shock. So with that, it put me into a spiral of a breakdown. And because I answered these two questions, which one was, do you have a gun at home? And do you have pills at home? This was what they asked me when I was in the emergency room. I answered yes to both, but not meaning that I'm going to use those. Because I answered yes, I was put into a 72-hour watch in a, not a psych ward, but it's a place where, people go that are either overdosing or whatever. That was an eye-opener for me because truly I really didn't belong there, and the psychiatrist who handles everybody in that facility knew that. So I got out in 2 days instead of 3. After that, of course, I had the breakdown, and 3 months later I had to have a hip replacement. So in 9 months, I lost a marriage. I had to leave a home. My son took his life. I had a major, surgery. So that is a lot for someone to handle at one time. And so I'm coming to you from a place of not only the loss of a child, but suffering with depression. Now, I did not have this prior to my son taking his life. It triggered severe depression, PTSD, which I still have, by the way, and panic attacks. And so all of that it took me, I would say I'm going to be very honest with you, a good 2 years to actually get myself up and over that hump of just really not wanting to go on to the next day. Every corner where we lived was a trigger, right? I went by Mike's high school. I went by this. We ate there. It was just constantly in my face. My son took his life at my dad's grave, which was he's buried at a Veterans Memorial Cemetery, as my son was a veteran. He served 2 deployments in Iraq. And 11 months before my son died, his chaplain took his life. So my son had compounded grief, but he also suffered with depression at the age of 6. Now, back then, what did we know 30 years ago about depression in children? And who even thought that a child could be depressed? So my son's, the way it came out in my son was irritability, impatient, kind of angry. Those are all signs of depression, but we don't know that. And especially when it's a boy, you just think, oh, he's just a boy. Boys have that kind of energy. And so I knew there was something not right, and we had gotten him some help. But again, as your child ages into an adult, you cannot make them go. You cannot make them get help if they don't want it. And my son was a Robin Williams, so he was the type that covered it with being funny. And he was the funny guy, and he was the go-to guy, and everybody gravitated to Mike. They all wanted to be around him. And so after he turned 30 in November, 5 weeks later, my son takes his life. I guess I'm thankful to say that I got a message. I got something. Usually you don't. Usually they don't give, here's a note, because they're not thinking about you. And it's not that they don't care about you, but at that moment, with the loss of that hope, like India says, within 5 minutes to an hour, it's when it happens. There's something in them that loss of hope, they can't see any other way out. And they didn't really want to take their life. They just wanted to end the pain, right? We hear that. And so if you don't mind, I'll read to you my son's text message. It came through at 9:02 a.m. on Saturday, December 27th. And I was with my then husband at his family's house for Christmas because his mom had lung cancer. And I thought, let's go there, we may not have her next year. That's who I am. I always make sure that I'm considerate of other people. Little did I know, it was my son's last Christmas. And it was my son's last Christmas that I wasn't there. It was the only time I didn't spend Christmas with my kids. So you can imagine the guilt, right? That's one of the 7 stages, is the guilt that you put on yourself, the guilt that I felt for not being there. Had I been there, I could have stopped Mike, because he came over to my house that night and slept at our house. And my daughter, of course, felt, I have an alarm, and somehow she didn't hear it, but Mike undid the alarm, and he left at 8 in the morning. So, the text comes through, and I just jumped up off my chair because I knew that my son meant this. This was not just a cry. He didn't do that. He says, I'm going out to visit Pop, but I'm not coming home. I have struggled with depression all my life. I just can't take it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so selfish in my decision today. I can't bear it anymore. Please ask God to forgive me and my actions today. I went to church before I came out here and asked myself, but I don't know. I'm so sorry. I wished I got killed in Iraq to keep you all from my selfish decision today. These last months of my life were the happiest I have ever been. Thank you all for giving me such a great life. I'm sorry. Please remember the funny me. So there were a lot of other things that kind of, obviously compounds. And these are compounded grief is the worst thing that you can do to yourself. If you have things that people you're losing, a job you've lost, a breakup, you need to get help and deal with that grief, because on top of this, on top of that, my dad died on my son's first deployment home. And I had to greet my son with, Pop died. So I'm so happy my son's home, which he should not have been greeted that way. And I carried that guilt too, that I should not have had to greet him like that. And I'm also grieving the death of my son, my father. And so where does my son go to take his life? My dad's gravesite. He never got over that, and he was not quite the same after that. And so between that, a breakup, just one thing after another, chaplain taking his life. My son was a chaplain assistant. He had to deal with calling the families in the military to tell them that you've lost your son or daughter or wife or husband, etc. A job, he should never have had that position, but you really don't know what it all entails until you sign up. But he was a great chaplain assistant. I still hear to this day from people in the military all around the world about Mike and what he did for them and how he saved their life, but he couldn't save his. So I just want you to know that please don't be hard on yourself. It's so easy to do that. And guilt is very normal. It's common. It is one of the stages of grief, which, by the way, is on my website, aftermathofsuicide.com. I also have a podcast that I do on anchor.fm. It's under Aftermath of Suicide. Instagram, it's the same name, Aftermath of Suicide, and Spotify. I talk about different topics that have to do with mental illness, because untreated depression is the #1 cause of suicide. 1 in 4 people suffer with a mental disorder. You know someone right now who does. Please, if you know that, pick up the phone, call them. Most will not reach out to you because they feel a burden. I know I did when I started to suffer. I just, recoiled and stayed in my home by myself. My daughter was in college out of state. So it was easy for me to just stay in bed, not shower for days. I was seriously depressed. And, so it takes, when people do reach out, you actually believe these people care about me, versus I'm going to call them because I need help. That doesn't usually happen. Even if you say to people, call me, I'm always here for you. We just don't want to, because we don't want to bother you. So, I felt that I needed to pay it forward when this happened. And it took me, I would say 3 years to start to come out of the fog, as I call it, when the reality hits you and everything's set in and this is real. And it's not going away. And the part of you that dies with your loved one. Of according to suicide.org, 115 people in that victim circle suffer when they take their life. It's a ripple effect. And, you know, I just know that it's nice when you reach out to those people that you know, because they need that, and that makes them feel important, that you care enough about them. And so ask them, are you suicidal? You know, do you have a plan? It's okay to ask that. In fact, it's imperative that you ask that. So we're not here to fix them, right? We're not saying you got to call them because you need to fix them if they're suicidal. You just need to be there. Let them know you care about them, and go over wherever they are if you can. So back to, I might jump all over the place because I have, you know, in a topic like this, losing a child, I mean, where do you even start? You know, I remember when it happened, I thought, how do I go on? Where do I go from here? I didn't even know how to live. I've lost part of my family. I had my daughter and my son. My daughter is now 32. She was 25 when my son took his life. Devastated her. I mean, her face went green and she almost passed out when she found out. So there is, like many have mentioned, there is that empty seat at the table during the holiday. There is, you know, just part of you dead inside. Part of you died, especially if you've lost a child. Part of me died with Mike, and he's buried there. I'm buried with him at the Veterans Memorial Cemetery, and he's just around the wall from my dad. So I learned that during the holiday season, I knew I didn't feel like putting up a tree. I did not feel merry, right? Merry Christmas, and everybody's saying it, and you're out there with all of the festivities. And there's moments as years go by, you will start to feel that the glimmer of hope, that being a little bit excited. But in the beginning, I wasn't. I did not. I was exhausted, as grief is draining. And so I realized I have to do what was right for me. It didn't matter what anybody else said or thought. I did not want to put up a tree. And for 3 years, I didn't. It took me that long to get myself to open up the bins and storages where my son's ornaments from childhood hit me. And I want to tell this because I want you to be prepared if it's the first time. Be prepared for when you open that, because I wasn't thinking. I just opened it, and there was, you know, as I went through things, Mike's little ornament, you know, that kids make in grade school where they dye the shredded wheat green, and in the middle is the picture of your child. And I saw that, and I just fell to the floor sobbing. And I thought, how am I going to do this? You know, how am I going to do this with going through all this stuff? And then the needlepoint stocking that my mom made for him when he was born. Beautiful. I mean, there it was. And I thought, how am I going to put this stocking up? Every time I look at it, it's a trigger. Triggers are tough, and you really, I say, want to try to avoid them as much as you can. For me, I had one picture up of my son because that's what worked for me. Every time I looked at his face, it was a trigger and a reminder that he was gone. So you have to do what works for you. So for me, whether the stocking was up or not being there was still a reminder that he's gone. Being there was a reminder that he's gone. So sometimes you may not want to put up any stockings. What I did too was I put the ornaments of my son and the things that he made along the years, I put it in the back of the tree where I don't see it all the time when I look at it, because again, it's a trigger. But at least he's on there, because I felt like if I didn't put it, I'm keeping him in a box. How can I do that to my son, you know? So those are just some things that I would suggest if that works for you. You know, again, that empty seat at the table. For me, look, it's 2 days after Christmas, so I have that black cloud always there that I know is coming right after Christmas. So it really dampens the holiday for me, and I try really, really hard to force myself to be in the spirit. I have Christmas music on, and all those things, and I loved all that. I mean, I loved this time of the year, but it's so hard um, when you've lost someone during the holiday period. It's never a right time, but that's even makes it worse. So, I do, on my site, I do offer grief counseling. And because I've lost a child, I can definitely relate to those that have, or even a loved one from suicide, because it's a completely different type of death. Uh, and again, finding the right therapist is key for you. And if you decide that, you feel that I might be a match for you, I offer the first hour free to you. And I will also send you my book. It's on my website, but can't see it maybe, kind of glary. Overcoming a Life Destroyed is what I named it. And you can see the picture of the storm, and I was drowning because I really was drowning. That's how I felt. I could barely stay afloat. So I offer that to you for free. And for those that do want to purchase my book, if you'd go to my website, all the proceeds from my book go to the Wounded Warrior Project and Tunnel to Towers to help our veterans and our first responders. And trust me, they really need our help. I mean, they come home without limbs, their spouses left them, and they are suicidal. So please, I'm on Amazon, but they take 45% of my money. And so if you buy it on my website, aftermathofsuicide.com, all of the proceeds do go to those two causes. But real quick, I did want to touch on eating healthy, as India mentioned. Eating healthy is so important to you, and I've been an advocate of that for many, many years, because it will make you feel depressed and sluggish. Avoid alcohol. That's a depressant. You wouldn't put cheap gas or oil if you had a Ferrari, would you? So why would you put that in your body? Your body is, I mean, it's your, I call it, it's your sanctuary. It's your vehicle through life. And another thing too about mentioning the story about the parents, where the daughter or the family member blamed the parents for the suicide. You can only change you. And when you change you, people around you change. I'm a big quote person. I am an advocate. You will see them on Instagram. I'm a motivator. I've been in sales all my life. And so, Dr. Phil says, we teach people how to treat us. Take a good hard look in the mirror. So please don't be a doormat and a punching bag for anybody, especially if you're going through anything like this, because you need to give to you before you could give to anybody, especially if you have other children or elderly parents to take care of. Make sure that you put good food in your body. One of my podcasts on Anchor is called You Are What You Eat. And your diet is not only your problem, but it's your answer. So think about that. I'm just going to real quick, do I have time, Peggy, to read real quick this poem?
You have about 3 minutes here, Jill.
Okay. It's in my book, and I came across this in one of my support groups, and it was by a woman, Beverly Levin Copeland, and it's in my book. It's called The Whole Family. My family has a hole in it. My whole family has a large, gaping hole. No one can fill the hole. No one can enter the void. No one in my whole family. My whole family goes on. My whole family goes forward. We struggle to remain whole, but the whole remains. Sometimes the whole pulls us closer together. Sometimes the whole separates us. Can our arms embracing each other diminish the whole? When someone says, "Is your whole family here?" Do you want to take the picture of your whole family? I think to myself, can't you see the whole? And I thought it was so amazing when I read this, because it's exactly how I feel when people will say, you know, is your whole party here? Is your whole family here? Or how many children do you have? And the first time I had to answer, I had 2, but I only have 1 now. There, you know, it's a lifelong work with something like this. And I mean, Mike will always be gone, right? From everything, my daughter's wedding, it will continue. And so you have to learn how to really give to yourself. Give to yourself. My therapist always asks, what are you doing for Jill today?